The new season of the GSL Code S has finally begun. It's been a very long time since the 2024 season wrapped up, but they are once more back over in South Korea with, well, what will hopefully be some fantastic StarCraft 2. In case you're unfamiliar, this is considered to be the most prestigious tournament for StarCraft 2 in South Korea, which is obviously the most dominant nation by far over the years that StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2 have been around for. Now, this particular best of 3, I heard, is an absolute banger. It's actually an elimination match, so the loser of this best of 3 is out of the GSL Code S already. This is from the group stage after both of these players managed to qualify. Basically what ended up happening is that both of them lost their first best of 3, and if you lose 2 of those back to back, you're out of the event. Spawning right here in the top right hand corner, playing with the blue Zerg drones, we have none other than Reynor. Now, of course, the tournament is open mostly to players from Korea because you have to be there in order to actually, well, play in the qualifiers. But Reynor decided to make the trip from Italy all the way over to South Korea, and he is participating in this tournament once again. His opponent, down in the bottom left, a 2-time world champion of StarCraft from way back in the day. With the red Protoss probes, he goes by the name of SOS. Now, SOS is considered to be a very cheeky player. Back when he won his world championships, the game was not nearly as discovered, okay? Players have obviously gotten a lot better over the years, and in general, in my mind at the very least, Reynor is the clear favorite going into a series like this. At the very least, assuming that SOS plays a standard macro game. And if you know anything about SOS, or if you need to know anything about SOS, he never plays standard. He always plays something weird, something wild, something wacky. So I'm not exactly sure what to expect from this particular match. So far, this is all looking pretty normal. So we'll have to see whether or not, you know, there's gonna be anything funky, but I highly doubt. I just don't see a world where SOS is gonna go up against one of the very best macro Zergs toe-to-toe in a like, it just doesn't really make sense. I really don't believe we're gonna be seeing something normal throughout this series. And if we do, well, I honestly expect that Reynor's gonna smash him, because Reynor really is that new generation of Zerg players, right? I mean, he's been around for quite a few years at this point. I think he's only like 22, maybe 23 years old, already obviously winning the World Cup as well back during COVID. It's been a little while, but Reynor is really ranked amongst the very best, and in macro games, he is nearly unbeatable, other than by other players that also play macro. So I think, at the very least in my mind, Reynor will be the defensive player throughout these games, and SOS will be very likely to throw some sort of curveball. Now, obviously, there is a little bit of backstory as far as this particular matchup goes. Generally speaking, Zerg players in the current meta, they don't really love playing long, drawn-out macro games. SOS definitely has something wild here in mind. I get it, like, all the signs are pointing towards it, right? So he goes Void Ray first. Void Ray first can be a very normal start. You can go Void Ray into Oracle. It's quite uncommon in 2025, but not unheard of. One thing, though, that's really nice when you go Void Ray first is that you can deny every single bit of scouting. Zerglings can be killed easy peasy, your third base can be defended easy peasy, and you can deny, what are you gonna do? You can deny any sort of Overlord scouts with ease. Okay, it's a 3.5-minute fleet beacon. There it is. This is likely going to be a mothership rush? Unless we plant down a second gateway, or a second Stargate, rather. Okay, we do go for a second Stargate. But this is exactly in line with what I was thinking. So, there's a few giveaways here for the Zerg. First off, the lack of a third. Normal timing for a third base, and this is what he's scouting over here on both of these sites. Normal timing for a third base for the Protoss player against Zerg is about 3:45. If you don't see a third Nexus by, well, now 4:15, you know that something spicy is likely coming your way. The problem is, what exactly will it be? Well, apparently, we're gonna go into a bunch of Tempests together with the Tectonic Destabilizers. This is the upgrade that allows the Tempest to deal double damage to structures. So SOS is likely gonna try and do like a hit and run on a building? You can now see the Zerglings going around on the minimap, trying their very best to see if there's some sort of proxy located somewhere. We're nearly 5 minutes into the game. There is still no third Nexus in any location. Another gateway down at the front here as well. A double-layered wall off here with Probius apparently first off, taking the damage if the Zerglings decide to commit. You're not really gonna... Oh, wow. Are you... You... You had one job. And that was to... How did we... Alright. Well, anyways, immediately drones are getting queued up. And that, of course, was a massive blunder. So for Reynor, it becomes a guessing game, right? If you don't get the information, you sort of need to prepare against everything. And if you need to prepare against everything, it means that you can't really be making a lot of drones. Now that he's seen that it's a Stargate, he needs to get a Spire going ASAP. Yep. Spire starts up as soon as the Lair did. Queen production has continued, and all he really needs here is a bunch of links to defend against an Adept run by, and then mostly just workers. That is a terrible moment, though, for SOS. Now he's got the Tempest out, but Zerg has had about a 30-second heads up that this is indeed on its way. And just getting that extra round of Queens out, just allowing these Queens to accumulate some additional energy for transfusions and all that, super, super nice. Now, this is still very much so on a timer. It takes, I believe, 5 Tempests to one-shot a Queen. So it's not going to be enough here to really kill all of those Queens in one hit. It's still, though, the timer here until that Spire is done. When the Corruptors are out, that's when the Zerg player can reliably start dealing with this. And at this point, obviously, those Adepts saw what's going on. SOS decides to respond by going into Void Rays of his own. And those Void Rays are going to be very, very handy because the Corruptors are an absolute no-brainer now. Imagine if this didn't get scouted. It would be very likely that Reynor would have at least like 10 less workers. I still wouldn't have hated this position. But getting those links into the base is by far the worst thing SOS could have had happen there. Like, that is rough. He's still getting good value, though, because obviously this is a tier 3 unit, and Reynor has been sitting on tier 1 for the majority of this game. Finally, Corruptors are coming. And you know what? SOS is actually starting to get some work done. The Queens are losing their life. He might want to target fire down the hatch. I mean, he's on a timer. If he knows at what point the Spire started, he can guess when the Corruptors will finish. I think you target the hatch and get out. Target the hatch and recall. Recall? Yep. It's a little slow on the recall there. Loses one more Tempest, but I think that was pretty much inevitable. And despite quite a rocky start, this was still extreme value here for SOS. Okay, so where do we go from here? Well, an Overseer Scout sounds like a great idea to me. What exactly do you expect right now as Reynor? Well, it's going to be more Stargates, I guess. More Stargate production, maybe into Charge, maybe into Storm. Something along those lines. Whatever it is, it will be quite difficult, though, for the Protoss player to be aggressive. The problem is, these units are expensive and they take a long time to produce. Yes, your army supply looks pretty good, but ultimately you only have like a dozen units at most. So having, and this is really good actually, keeping those drones busy with a bunch of Adepts is very, very nice, but you can't really move out very easily here as a Protoss player moving forward. That means that Reynor can either commit to an all-in of his own, or he can try and play macro on the back of it, and I think that's what he's doing. He's basically adding on more and more Corruptors, and then more and more workers. It is, by the way, going to be for Storm. Storm will be the likely next weapon of choice. Templar Archives over here on the left side of the main. Now, of course, for a Zerg player, it's also a little dicey if you overmake Corruptors, because if you're stuck with like 50 Corruptors, and suddenly there's a bunch of charge slots going in. Sure, the Corruptors might be able to skill the Skytools units, but the Corruptors aren't particularly useful until you can morph them into Brute Lords. So it's still a weird balancing act. I would have liked to see this game if SOS did not somehow, some way let these units slip through. That was honestly very, very sloppy by him. Either way, +1 air weapons is now done. Storm's coming up. I think what SOS is trying to do at this point in time is go for a Death Bowl. Add in a bunch of Archons. Archons, so the Protoss units can't just get overwhelmed by Corruptors as easily, since the Archons deal splash damage. Storm is a great idea. Charge is good for like a mineral dump, so I don't think the Charge slot should really be part of his like maxed out army, but it's nice to have around. Reynor's task, though, is to try and slow this down in whatever way possible. If he gets a cancel on the 4th, that would be huge. Just barely not enough units available. Getting a kill here on the Cybercore is also good, though, because ultimately these Protoss units need the +2 air attack. Protoss can't really go for much else. You really do need to go for that +2 air research ASAP. Especially on carriers. He doesn't have carriers in this mix yet. But I wouldn't be surprised if those are going to start up at some point in the near future too. But yeah, basically this was a 2-base Tempest Rush. That, I mean, sort of failed, but it still got a good bit of value. And then a follow-up into full Turtle Skytles. Now, I know there's going to be some Zerg players listening to this. And they're shuddering in their boots. They're not enjoying that type of playstyle at all. This is honestly, as somebody who's played a lot of Zerg, this is one of my worst nightmares as a Zerg player going up against Protoss. 2-base Skytles rush into full Turtle Protoss is one of the hardest strategies for Zerg players to deal with. But that is for run-of-the-mill Zerg players, you know. I've made it to maybe I don't know, top 150 or so. Run-of-the-mill Zerg players struggle. If, however, you are Reynor, you can actually pull off some magic. The main problem is that you have to be very delicate with a lot of different control groups. So you need control groups for Corruptors, preferably you add in Vipers. You want to make sure you have Infestors. You want to make sure that you have Corrosive Biles. You want to go into these Lurkers, maybe a Nidus Worm. This is the type of unit composition that becomes extremely tricky when you are not 100% controlling your army effectively. And it's super hard to micro this type of... Because you need like 4 or 5 control groups very quickly. And if you make a mistake, and as you probably know, the StarCraft battles are very quick. If you make a mistake in any one of those control groups, you will find yourself losing. Good snipe over there. 1 Corruptor goes down, but for a single Void Ray, that is not a bad deal. Reynor right now feels pretty comfy, I think, though. Once he gets these upgrades done, he is in a position where he can actually stop that Death Ball A move. But SOS is going to commit, and Lurkers aren't yet available. This is still a great opportunity, honestly, for the South Korean Protoss player. He's got this base now building all the way at the bottom. Corruptors are trying to go around the site. We need to see some really good storms. Nice Corrosive Bile here from the Zerg player to try and slow this down. I mean, it's a lot of supply caught up in Roaches and Ravagers. This hatchery is certainly not going to happen. If SOS keeps marching through, it is a real opportunity. I actually like that he commits over here through the static defense. He wants to force those Corruptors to move in. The Archons need to move back, though. The Archons need to be protecting the Skytles. He sees right now that the Corruptors are in the back. Tempest, for some reason, decided to turn around. SOS is making a full transition towards a ground army instead. If he cannot push through this, he's going to have to deal with a ton of Lurkers. At this point, though, there's no Greater Spire yet. And the lack of a Greater Spire means that there's a ton of supply caught up into units that aren't particularly useful. SOS is making a full switch to ground, and there's like 50 army supply of Zerg committed to flying units that cannot currently hit anything on the ground. Still though, reinforcing Roaches are coming up. A little bit of move commanding here. Quite sloppy, honestly, from SOS. Corruptors, of course, do have that caustic spray ability, but it's like a 45-second cooldown. And yeah, now it's been used, and the Stalkers are going to be able to chase this away. That was a real opportunity again for SOS, but it slipped through his fingers. Yeah, I don't think that was the ideal for the ideal fight for Protoss at all. Move commanding really deep. Army quite disjointed. He is going to try and hold on, and obviously, economically speaking, he still has a worker lead. 74 versus 68. The problem is there's an awful lot of Zerg knocking at his front door here already. The problem with transitioning from tier 3 Skytles to like a tier 2 ground toss is that Lurkers are obviously going to be available for Zerg. That's, of course, a tier 3 anti-ground unit. You've effectively forced out a switch as well towards a Greater Spire. At the very least, that would happen, I think, in like the majority of the games. Now, Reynor has decided to not make that call, but you can imagine how good a Protoss ground army is against Lurker Broodlord. Like, that is the absolute ultimate late game. I don't want to see any ground unit for Zerg. Like, that type of army absolutely massacres ground toss. Well, Reynor doesn't want to give the opponent a lot of time to breathe. 50 minutes into the game, Natural and Main are going to run low. This expansion needs to be denied. SOS, though, is rebuilding pretty rapidly. What a weird way to play Protoss, but this is exactly how SOS has always played the game. He knows the rules, but then he immediately mixes them up a little bit. That Observer needs to be denied. Yeah. Ooh, some good storms. Reynor slowly inching forward. He does have a bunch of Zerglings in the meantime, killing an Immortal. Not a bad trait there for the Zerg player whatsoever. Zealots charge forward. Some big storms going down. Ooh. Yeah, the Lurkers still live. Lurkers are quite beefy units. Reynor backs up here to the safety of those Lurkers. Don't bunch your units up too much, especially not in a line. And the Lings are starting to flood through. Those Corruptors still up in the air. I think the Corruptors are mostly here to deny any sort of Skytles transition on the back of this. Now, there is an Oracle coming up. The idea of the Oracle is that it can be used to throw a Revelation on top of the Lurkers, because the Corruptors together with an Overseer can snipe the Observers pretty easily, and without detection, you can't see the Lurkers. So this really does become a Lurker problem here for SOS the longer that this game goes on. I think Reynor can just double down and make only Lurkers and be fine. Yeah. Like, I think in straight up power, right? Reynor is the better player. However, strategically speaking, SOS has some real funny tricks up his sleeve. And I mean, the tricks still sort of work despite being spotted, right? So imagine this game if he did not let those Zerglings slip through the cracks in the natural expansion. If he did not, well, let his ground army get caught like that. I think there was a very real opportunity for him to obtain the victory in this match. Well done, though, by Reynor. Yeah, shuts down the 4th Nexus. The main and the natural are going to be running very dry very soon. In the meantime, Zerg has got a ton of money in the bank to just remax this again if he needs to. And I just don't really see a Protoss army of 140 supply in total punch their way through a maxed out Hydra Lurker Bowl. It's just not going to happen. A lot of damage being done here in the meantime, too. Some long distance mining happening on the left side. Reynor doesn't really need to take any risks. Yeah, I'd actually agree with him not really taking any chances. In the meantime, there's a couple of AFK units here for the Protoss. That storm is hitting nothing. GG gets gold. Reynor obtains the victory in game number 1. Okay, next up, we find ourselves on Ultra Love. Let's see. So far, the builds have been extremely normal. It's once more going to be a Stargate, but I would not be surprised at all if SOS once again builds up a Void Ray as the very first unit. 99% of Protoss players out there go for, well, at least at the pro level, they go for an Oracle or 2 or 3. Sometimes with a Void Ray to begin that party, but I think in this instance, SOS is likely to try some sort of trick again. Man, I can't believe you let the Zergling slip through. That's so frustrating. So if you've been watching StarCraft for a long time, right? So if you've been watching, say, from like Wings of Liberty, you know that the general skill level at the highest level has just been climbing year after year after year after year. And back in the day, it wasn't that uncommon for units to slip through the wall-offs. But when you think about it, it's such a basic mistake. All you need to do is not move this unit. Leave it on hold position. Don't hit the all army hotkey, and you will be okay. It's not rocket science. Actually, they introduced the all army hotkey once upon a time, and I think it was a good change. But maybe if it never actually came into StarCraft 2, maybe this would have never been an issue. Anyways, Void Ray first again. Fleet Beacon. Oh my god, man. Why did you put it over there, SOS? Absolute madman. This is, once more, a very quick Fleet Beacon. But I wouldn't be convinced here if I was SOS that that Fleet Beacon wasn't scouted. I think you'd just barely be able to glance at that OV and realize it probably wasn't envisioned. But geez, we could have moved it a couple squares further away, man. That was dangerous. Oh, okay, we have a bit of variety. So yes, this is a very quick Fleet Beacon, but it's not a second Stargate. So it's a quick Twilight Council. What are we doing? Mothership Zealot all in? Like, what are we... No, it's Tempest again. Tempest again? I'm not sure about the Tempest. Maybe the idea is to try and show the Zerg player the exact same build. And then be like, oh no, I made a mistake, oopsie. I'm so bad at the game, I showed you my Tempest. Whoopsie daisy. And then hit him in the face with Zealots? No, it's Glaive Adept. Okay, same idea, I guess. Yeah, it's tricky for Zerk at this point, because you just don't have a way to scout. So technically, and maybe this is what you can do as a Zerk player at this level, if you feel like you are the better player, like in a straight-up macro game, maybe a Reynor could go Overlord speed. With Overlord speed, you could still get the scouting information in. The problem is mostly that it's quite expensive, and it cuts into your early game queen production, because you kind of already need to have it done at this point in time. So you don't get as many queens, and then obviously you might lose against something else silly. Even though in the previous game the queens kind of died, they did buy a lot of time to, you know, get the defense out against those Tempests. They basically used their bodies as a tanking mechanism to try and buy time for the Spire. This is a single Tempest. What? Like, this is a single Tempest killing drones. Now, one thing it will do, and I don't think this is actually the right play, is force out a Spire. Because when there's smoke, there's fire, you would imagine there's going to be a lot more units, and then suddenly SOS shows up with a gajillion adepts. Can he complete the wall? Perfect. Lovely move right there by Reynor. Still, though, it's not entirely safe yet. Nope. He's gonna need a lot more units. Maybe he can go into Mutas rather than Corruptors in this instance. Good trait, though, here for those adepts. Queens transfuse each other in the main base. In the meantime, we have a couple adepts over here at the third base, too, targeting down a bunch of those workers. The Spire has been spotted, I assume? Well, he's gonna see it now. What an absolute disaster to play against, man. Okay, imagine you're in Reynor's shoes right now. You're dealing with so much stuff. None of this is quote-unquote normal. Now, interestingly enough, 18 workers down the drain. 24 drones in total. Reynor is still ahead in the worker count. That's how committed this early game from Protoss is. Yeah. That was actually not that good of a defense from the Zerk at all. But there he is again, dude. Little Tempest. The little Tempest that could. That's a children's book I would read. If I ever have kids. The Little Tempest that would. The Little Tempest that... I would love to read that, yeah. So, in the end, they end up with a very similar worker count. Was this trick good enough? Well, I guess one thing to keep in mind, this SOS already has the resources now to go into a Mama ship. He's got 400. I wouldn't mind seeing it start up, mostly because the unit is so incredibly powerful these days. Ever since they removed the ability for the mothership to be abducted, obviously it can't be neural. Zerk basically needs to go Corruptors against it. Now, there is a single Corruptor out. Rico is going to be... well, used over here to keep the 2 HP Tempest around for a little bit longer. Honestly, still a banger of a start here for SOS. I feel like this is one of those situations where this is the type of attack that is way harder to defend for the Zerk than it is for the Protoss to execute. And StarCraft is full of those things. Oh, I think knocking down the rocks is really clever. Yeah, knocking down the rocks here are 100% the right call. This is a Stalker all-in on the back of all of this. He's blinking away to make sure that the Stalkers do not get crushed. But the proxy pylon over here with the gateway right next to it, he's going to try and send in as many of these reinforcements as possible. So this is a multi-layered all-in. SOS prepared something spicy for these matches. You'll have to see it. Let's see. Where do we go from here? I'm a bit afraid that if this does not work, we're gonna see a repeat of what happened in the previous match, where slowly as the game progresses, Reynor just overpowers. Like, this is starting to run out of steam already, and it hasn't even really gotten going yet. It's not that he's in a terrible position or whatever, but yeah, we are now making the shot. Double Forge. Charge on the back of this, fourth Nexus on the back of this as well. Overseer Scout is going to confirm that there is no additional Sky Pills building. That's big. That means that Reynor is not going to be able to, well, at least not going to be forced to make additional Corruptors at this point in time. There's a single Corruptor flying around. We have a Muta as well in the control group. Probably going to try and use that one to maybe kill a Warp Prism or something along those lines. Getting a Council on this Nexus would be huge. Now, those Zerglings aren't going to go home. Council has been completed. And that's going to put Reynor once more in a really nice position. Yeah, he's just bought a bunch of time for himself. And even though this is by no means game over, he's made a little bit of room for himself to breathe. Infestation Pit, though, on the back of this. And you can tell that Reynor is still very much so respecting this. Only 68 workers. It's not a whole lot. It means that this type of army for the Zerg player can actually be replenished without... it's doable, but you prefer having like 80 workers here as the Zerg. This is on the lower end of things. He's been making a lot of Hydras. No Hydra ranged yet, but he does have the speed upgrade for it. +1 melee coming up. Reynor already setting up a bunch of roaches. He knows the charge slots are likely going to be hitting the battlefield because he saw a bunch of zealots getting warped in when he did the Ling surround on that Nexus. Here's once again Storm, though. Here's once again a Robo facility. SOS is actually playing some really solid StarCraft. I've kind of missed his style. He's not making any, like, other than the big blunder with that Zergling run by in the previous match. He's not really making any terrible mistakes or whatever. In general, as time has gone by, those trick strategies that SOS is very fond of, they have lost popularity, mostly because the opposition has gotten better. But that doesn't mean that they're no longer viable. Storm is not yet done, by the way. Those High Templar need to be real careful. There's a Corruptor pretending that it is indeed a Overseer here. Just hanging out. Yep, a little bit of a caustic spray. Sure, it's nice to have 600 and... Look at the APM! That is... don't get me wrong, SOS is not playing a slow game. And there is certainly some inflation as far as the APM goes for Reynor. But my god, a 400 APM difference is quite extreme. Lurkers are once more coming, though, and SOS hits the perfect timing. Reynor has got all of his units split up to try and deal with a Zealot run by, but that does mean that he doesn't have all of his units in the right place at the right time, and the hatchery over here falls. Now the Zealots up north. No, go after the hatch. Where are you guys going? What? I don't think you would have been able to kill the hatchery, but geez, would have been a better target than dying in the gnat. Either way, though, still a successful attack right there from SOS, as he does snipe down that base. And you know what? The Double Forge was quite greedy earlier on. Now he's researching +3/+2. Lurkers still don't have their full upgrades. SOS can keep this ball going. Go. We can continue fighting. Does he have any form of detection, though? He doesn't. He does not have an Observer. He does not have Oracles. Normally, Protoss players have Oracles left over from the early game. But those Lurkers... Yeah, now he makes one. Ay. A reactionary Oracle at this point, as if... Like, you already saw the Lurkers, as if there weren't going to be Lurkers, is a bit silly. This has completely now taken the wind out of the sails of SOS. Still, though, this is the type of game that I think if you're Reynor, if you lose this, you might start tilting. Like... This is the tilter game. SOS famously has never cared for such things. Tilting, being upset, doesn't seem to be part of his vocabulary at all. A little bit of a roach attack here, though. Attempted on the other side of the map, and I quite like it. We are now at the phase where Zerg players actually don't really need the roaches anymore, so you may as well try and get some sort of value. And this is nice because he can lose the roaches, get some value, and then also replace them with Hydro Lurker. And apparently SOS is... he's kind of indecisive. Recalls a bunch of units back home eventually. Leaves some of the units on creep. Hello. Okay, well, it works out this time around, but that could have been an absolute disaster. Losing those Templar here would have been pretty much the same deal as giving up the match. Next is in the far top left, a little overly ambitious. Generally, you go for the one over here. Okay, shall we do a little bit of first-person view right here for the Zerg player? If we know that apparently we're at 600-something actions a minute on average, that's about, I don't know, like 10, 11 buttons a second. Now, there is a little bit of inflation, mostly because of the way that character repeat rates work. So when Zerg players make, for example, a big round of units, they will hold down a key. And then for every single Corruptor, say, for example, that gets queued up, it counts as a single action. But what you're actually doing is you're holding down a key. Oh, great surround over there with the blink. Reynor loses those units, but he quickly replaces them. A little bit of first-person view here from SOS. I mean, it's not slow. It's just slower. He's like, oh, Zerglings. Oh, I guess I'll warp in a unit. It's a different style, okay? Oh, God. That was a very ambitious blink. Okay, maybe. I don't really love this positioning here, though, for Protoss at all. He does have a bunch of Immortals in the mix, and this Observer, I guess, is also quite well positioned, but yeah, this is messy as hell. Wow. That is not the way to fight it. Reynor has decided to move and chase this down a little bit. Plenty of Lurkers remaining. He does not really care. Massive amount of Zealots on the right side. Now we go for the Mothership. Yeah. You know what? This game is still very winnable, though, for SOS. Like, he's got all the stuff that he truly needs. He's got 71 workers. He's building up a 5th Nexus. He's now finally making a carrier transition. I feel like a lot of this could have happened a while ago. Reynor has never been rich this game. Like, if you look at his bank, yeah, he's maxed. But he doesn't really have a whole lot of stuff. Problem is, of course, the Mothership and the carrier transition. All of this takes forever. He's chronoing all of the units to the best of his abilities, but this has now given up the pressure on that Zerg army for a bit. He could have done this while he was pushing up north. Now he's got to be dealing here with this Zerg army at the exact same time as he's trying to make that call. Keep in mind, though, that the Mothership does have that cloaking ability, and that might just be what he needs to actually push forward. There are only a handful of Overseers here in the mix. Already, though, Corruptors are here, together with a bunch of Vipers. Even though he hasn't seen a Skytools unit since the early game, he knows that this is likely going to be imminent. I love the slow push over here with the Lurkers. Okay, some nice abductions. Lovely work. Gets the Immortals out of the equation. No reason to overextend this. Mothership is now around. He wants to go around the side? We're doing a counterattack? Really? We're doing a sneaky counterattack with the biggest unit that Protoss has. I mean, this is going to create a base race. I love those Corruptors in the main base. Caustic spraying down a single Stargate is actually super useful. We're going straight for the throat? I mean, if you could deny the +3 melee, that would be really good, but I believe that that one is indeed going to finish. Sadly here for SOS, not quite attacking the correct Evo chamber. In the meantime, though, Lurkers are tearing apart most of the bases. Looks like Zerg has sent the majority of the troops back home, though. How about this fight over here? The Spire just got targeted. Yeah, there's not really that much Skytools available, I suppose. How many Corruptors are there? 5 and then 8 more on the production tab. I think that should cut it. Also some Hydras, of course, with some supplemental damage for the anti-air. Same for the Queens. So far, though, this Protoss army is cloaked. Corruptors come in. I love that Time Warp on the ramp. Time Warp reduces movement speed as well as attack speed for units in the bubble by 50%, which is massive, but I just don't think SOS has the numbers. He recalls now? We could have recalled a half minute ago. Okay. When you put up the Time Warp over here and you knew you weren't going to kill anything else, that would have been the moment to recall. Like, we just stood around there for 10, 15 seconds doing nothing. Yeah, and this is now reminding me a little bit again of the previous game. In straight up power, like, Reynor's power level is bigger. For the Dragon Ball Z guys, okay, watching this, his power level is over 9,000. What? 9,000? Right. SOS doesn't have the same power level, but, you know, he's really strong. And he can punch way above his weight class, but ultimately, in these longer games, It is just so freaking difficult to kill those, well, highest ranked Zerg players on the planet. There is just no easy way around it. Reynor's entire mindset going into this series was to not die and then overwhelm. That seems at the very least the style that he's chosen to go for, and I think it's very clever, although it does certainly leave you vulnerable. SOS technically still has a chance. He's once more trying to see if he can move in for the base race. Reynor is forced to go back home. Corruptors are gonna once more go after one of those buildings they can actually hit, and that'll be the end of another Nexus. In the meantime, though, we have this army over here, and it's not gonna be enough. Reynor obtains the victory in this best of 3 series. You know what? Shall we have a look as well at the final deciders match for the player that moves on out of Group A in the round of 12 of the GSL. It's a matchup, a best of 3, that comes down to these 2 Zerg players. Spawning right here in the bottom left-hand corner, playing with the blue Zerg drones, we have none other than Reynor, of course, the man who just won, and then his opponent all the way in the opposite corner of the map. We're looking at Solar's main hatchery. So, these 2 played that same day twice. So, the way that a GSL group works, and I'm going to try and describe this in words, which is a little bit tricky. I'm going to try and do a good job, okay? There's 4 players, and what they use is what players in the StarCraft community call a GSL format. Guess what? It's the GSL that started doing this, I guess, first and foremost. And apparently in other esports, they also call it a GSL format. Long story short, you have a 4-player group, and you have 2 players going up against one another. The 2 winners of those series play against each other too, and then the winner of that particular series qualifies for the next round. However, out of every 4-man group, 2 players move on, right? So it's obvious that the player that wins both of their series, that's the one who moves on, right? That makes perfect sense. How, however, do you decide who moves on out of that group in second place? Well, first off, you have the 2 losers playing against each other in the losers match. Then you have the winner of the losers match going up against the loser of the winners match to decide who moves on out of second place. Did that make any sense? Anyways, this particular match is the deciders match. So Solar, in this particular case, is the loser of the winners match, and Reynor is the winner of the losers match. I hope you were paying attention, because this will be on the test. Anyways, we've got ourselves a Zerg versus Zerg to decide it all. The other player, by the way, that was also in this group was Cure. And Cure was the winner of the winners match. There you go. Cure, obviously, looking incredibly powerful. I may actually still check out the games that he played as well against SOS. Because I'm sure that SOS is, gonna play some funky strats against that as well. Although, sadly for me, and now I guess also for you, we already know the results. Anyways, journey before destination as per usual. Now, what that does mean, though, since Cure obviously played against SOS in his first game, it also means that Solar played against Reynor in his first match. Both of these guys had already played against one another, and at the time, it was Solar in the first series that ended up winning. So this is a rematch that was played, I think, about an hour or so later. I haven't yet seen these games. I did see the other Zerg versus Zerg that they played. And it was very Zerg versus Zergy, in the sense that there's a lot of Zerglings and roaches going around the map. Reynor, over the last couple of months, well, first off, he hasn't been playing a lot of StarCraft initially. He was playing a lot of League, and he was doing a bit of off-racing. I have seen him play a lot of Protoss versus Zerg. His PvZ is really good. But he specifically mentioned going into the GSL that he's feeling very confident about his ZVZ. So even though he lost once against Solar, I don't know if that really mattered all too much. Now, so far, this game, by the way, is very normal. Neither player really committing to anything too crazy. Third hatchery is going to finish up for the both of them. We see a single Baneling morphing in for the both of them too. Reynor has seen the timing there of his opponent's Roach Warren, and now Solar is going to do the exact same thing on the other side of the map. Okay. Effectively, what we have here is both players trying to play a macro game, but since it's Zerg versus Zerg, it takes a gentleman's agreement, you know? There's a lot of little safety precautions that you have to bake into your strategy to make sure that you don't just lose to a bunch of Zerglings. Very easy for the opponent to run them across the map since they're so quick. Either way, +1 missile coming up here for Reynor. Do we have an evolution chamber yet for Solar? Not the case. That will be something that Reynor is now also looking for. He sees the lack of a lair. He sees the lack of an evo chamber. That means that he's very likely going to be committing to a big attack. Likewise, Solar runs a unit into his opponent's base. Sees the lack of a lair. He hasn't yet seen the evo chamber though, and he's looking for that right now. Will not get that vision. +1 missile is a big upgrade, especially in Roach Wars. So when you're going up against an army with roaches that have +1 and you do not, it makes a tremendous difference. But obviously at this point, Solar hasn't made that commitment. Yeah, he needs to be careful though. There's so much movement on the minimap, right? He doesn't really want to get overwhelmed here. I think he needs to start up an evo chamber of his own pretty soon. In a way, you're also playing Lair Chicken, mostly because the Lair is pretty expensive. It's 150 minerals and 100 gas. Both players can easily afford it. The problem is that if you need to make a lot of roaches in a pinch, and your opponent hasn't gone for a Lair, they might just be able to show up with a couple more roaches than you were expecting. Okay, so Roach Chicken into Lair Chicken has been completed. Reynor has decided to go for both +1 missile as well as a Lair. Obviously, if all of those things finish up, most notably for the Lair, it's going to be Roach Speed. If all of this finishes up, life's going to be fantastic here for the Italian Zerg. He decides to go for a safety Spine Crawler too, expecting indeed that Solar is going to be the one who will be aggressive. Solar's been making a ton of units, by the way. He's hiding them behind his wall-offs. So he's flooding the map right now with Zerglings too. They will be reinforcing this army, but Solar is effectively committed to... I don't want to quite call this an all-in, but it's certainly, let's call it dedicated pressure, because he needs to deal damage with this. I wouldn't even mind seeing Reynor evacuate the third, but I guess he doesn't really want to lose that income. Defender's advantage, though, is big. Just the fact that Reynor's units spawn closer to the battle is going to be extremely useful. Keep in mind, he also has +1. Spine Crawler is also going to be fantastic. So far, this fight is not looking too hot for Solar, but he needs to commit. Banelings are hunting down whatever they can hit, but the roaches take the brunt of the damage, although the Spine Crawler is still collateral. Nice micro over here in the meantime down south, but one of the Ravagers is a little far forward, and I think that Reynor has this defense in the bag. Both players, though, forced to scrape the bottom of their barrels, right, when it comes to the resource count. They need to try and make as many reinforcements as possible, but that was cleanly executed for Reynor. He knows that the opponent is committed. He restarts the Lair, by the way, apparently canceling it the first time around. So even though he did play Lair Chicken with the opponent, he decided to panic cancel it. And I think it was indeed the right call. That does mean it's going to be difficult for him to counterattack, but he knows right now that he's got the economical advantage. He can scout for it, but at this point it's 59 versus 48 drones. And as you know, in the game of drones, you win or you die. There is no middle ground. Ned Stark, he sucked at playing the Game of Thrones. He'd be a terrible Zerg player. Anyways. Lair coming up. Solar is a little quicker on his. Now, there are ways to come back in this matchup. Like, for example, by building a Spire. Okay, it's not going to be the case. Solar is going into the Overlord speed together with Roach speed together with +1 missile. Reynor has decided to go into the +1 armor of his own. Galio reconstitution. And you know what? Solar does go Spire. That does mean, though, that he's committed a lot of resources into things that aren't going to be useful for another little while. Reynor's move out here is almost like a fake. Yeah. Because he doesn't yet have his upgrades to really commit to this. He's decided, by the way, to cancel the +1 armor and go for +2 missile instead. I don't hate it, but there is a bit of indecisiveness. This means, though... Ooh. I thought those were only roaches as well, but there was one baneling mixed together with those units. This does mean that Solar is buying enough time for the Spire to eventually finish. Reynor is looking around. He sees the Evo chamber. What about... Ooh, this little changeling. Oh, the drone sniped it. Nicely done by Solar. Roach push here is still fake. Difficult to know, though, and the Spire is slowly ticking. What Reynor is hoping for with this attack is that maybe he can force out a lot of roaches out of the opponent, or maybe he can just take a fight. I mean, the fight was originally not supposed to take place just yet until Roach Speed was done, I believe, but Reynor saw an opportunity and he decides to grab it with both hands. He does indeed have the, yeah, just a straight up numbers lead. Okay, and this is a little bit of an anticlimactic moment, but it's mostly just because Reynor has been slowly climbing ahead in the supply count as this game progressed. It's all of the little things added together. GG. Next up, we find ourselves on Maganatha. This time around, Solar has decided to put it all on the line. If he loses this game, he is out of the GSL in the round of 12. You don't want to lose in a round of 12. It's not what anybody wants. Actually, is it round of 16 or is it round of 12? No, I think it's round of 12, yes. You don't want to be out at this point in the tournament. However, sometimes you gotta take chances. This is a massive map. Getting across the map takes a long time. Obviously, Zerglings are quick units, especially with Metabolic Boost. Solar has made... yeah, just enough gas. He's got just enough gas to go for that link speed upgrade. There's a lot of paths, though, that you do take across. So this is the advantage, I guess, of playing this map. It's unlikely that the opponent's Overlord is going to see where your Zerglings are going to go because the map is so big. So he should be able to get across the map completely unscouted. How many links is he going to commit to? That's the question. He will be making an expansion on the back of this, but he's already 6 workers behind. 8 workers behind now. And you need to be able to justify this early game by dealing damage on the other side of the map. Solar's still making Zerglings, by the way. He's effectively all in with this now. He needs to deal at least some sort of damage. Killing the hatchery would be lovely. He's attacking the hatch, mostly to try and force a reaction here out of the Zerg player. He does not want to have to deal with this, you know, I mean, you ideally want to pull drones against it, but it's a difficult call to make. Reynor doesn't know if there's going to be banelings on the back of this as well. That's the real issue. Generally, you pull drones a little bit before this point, though. I think if you target down the hatch, you can easily kill it. Yeah, if you target down the hatch, so at least enough time was bought for Brenda. Brenda did pop out. Solar will indeed kill that expansion. Ooh, running around, tried to slip up the ramp. Is not going to be able to achieve that goal. This is a queen that effectively was paid for with a hatchery, dude. That's beautiful. You deserve it, Brenda. I think we all agree that you do. Okay, the Spine Crawler is going to be inching down to the low ground. Reynor smashes his piggy bank and makes 1 Baneling. Okay. So this is effectively, I mean, I don't want to call it the best case scenario, but it is about the best instance that you can hope for here as Solar. And was this really worth it? Keep in mind that if he would have gone against any sort of pool first build from Reynor, this attack from him would have gone terribly wrong. Furthermore, if Reynor would have committed to some sort of cheese of his own, and obviously he's leading the series 1-0, if he would have gone for like a committed all-in, like this was a pretty, you know, low ball all-in from Solar, he would have absolutely crushed this attack from Solar and then counterattacked immediately. So it's a very high risk, and I don't even want to call it high reward. It's a high risk, low reward strat, which technically can work, and I think this did kind of work, but you're not actually far ahead here. So that's one of the reasons why we generally don't see these early game openers that often. I guess, though, maybe also from the previous series, Solar has got enough information on the opponent to know that this wasn't going to be early game pressure from Reynor. But, I mean, it's not like you really need to practice early game pressure that much when you're a player of this caliber, right? Like, these guys can dream this sort of strategy without having to ever think about it. Okay. Well, now the ball right here is on Reynor's court. Both players have been making a lot of drones. +1 armor here is the big commitment, by the way. +1 armor allows the Zerglings to live 1 Baneling shot. They're going to be left at very low amounts of HP, and obviously if the Zerglings get a follow-up, they're going to be able to put in a lot of work, but this was something that Solar has seen. So either it's going to be +1 armor, or it's going to be +1 melee at this stage in the game. He doesn't know which of the two it's going to be. +1 armor, no, is nice here for Reynor because it also affects the roaches. Okay. Ring around the rosy is completed. Maybe this Zergling can finish the job. Nope. 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 Okay. Both players are going to be able to get their third hatchery up, it looks like. Yeah. And ultimately, we are sort of transitioning towards a relatively macro-focused game. Now, this is Solar still attempting it. Zergling Scout in the meantime, though, for Reynor on the other side of the map. Can Solar get the snipe on this hatch? That would be massive. It's a lot of banelings. It's very committed. Reynor, though, runs his banelings through the opponent's banelings. Ooh, one baneling remains. A new one coming up. Queens are also now here. If he targets the hatch, I think he's going to be able to get it. Yeah. He will be able to get that. Good dodging there by Solar, actually. Man. High-ranking players in StarCraft are unbelievably good. All of these little moves are so easy to mess up. Okay. And that may have just been what Solar needed. Gets the perfect scout as well now of the opponent's lair timing. Is this going to prompt a lair of his own? Because he's got the resources for it. I wouldn't mind seeing one start up. He has spent his money, though, onto a Evo chamber. And there was an attempted attack here by Reynor. It's again a fake out, but you never really know. A little bit of first-person view. This is what Reynor was looking at while playing the match. Man, I love watching high-level mirror matchups. I do hate playing mirror matchups, though. It is just so tricky to do it well. A little bit of Solar first-person view. He's committed to an attack right now towards the other side of the map. Zergling Scout from Reynor just now sees that there is no workers over at the third base of Solar. And that means indeed that there has to be an all-in coming. Is there going to be enough? Good targeting there onto the first Spinecrawler. There was already a Spinecrawler from the early game. Another one is building behind that wall. Looks like Reynor is preparing to maybe give up on the third. That's why the Zerglings are working away at it. Roach is here, containing the opponent. And this is a great little attack from Solar. He once more gets a snipe on a hatch. That's the third hatchery that he's killed throughout these games. Still macroing on the back of this as well, trying to bile down whatever he can. Drones pulled away for Reynor in the meantime to try and save this base if possible. Solar trying to push through, but he does not want to overextend. Corrosive balls, though, are landing here for the player in blue. And it's not the end of the world yet for Reynor, but this is a attack where the target firing here from Solar is excellent too. I'm going to take control of the camera again, which means that the players switch colors. Apparently on Solar's screen. He's the one in blue, and the opponent is the one in red. Okay. Okay. So now, ultimately, where do we end up? Well, Reynor does not have a third. He's going to try and rebuild it, but he's now lost 3 hatcheries. That's a lot of resources down the drain. 4 Spinecrawlers at 100 minerals each. A Roach Warren at 150 minerals. The 2 Queens at 175 each. All of this adds up very, very quickly. Reynor could try and do a Spire follow-up or a Nidus Worm follow-up, but Solar is still running around these bases, being a nuisance. And he now knows that that is unlikely to be a commitment. Instead, what Reynor does is to go for a +2 missile, which is technically possible. It's just, it's gonna take a long time. Like, it's gonna be a while until this upgrade finishes up. And if it's up to Solar, I mean, it's very much so up to Solar. If he wants to let the Zerg player on the other side of the map actually finish up all of that research. He's gone for +1 missile himself and the Roach speed as well. 4th hatchery coming up. Solar could still go for a Spire of his own, just like in the previous game. But in my mind, it's always something that you try to come back with, although it really doesn't have to be. Great scouting here from both players. Honestly, this is a proper high-level game. Both of these players extremely good at playing ZVZ. It takes 4 corrosive balls here, so we're looking around the map. Trying to snipe whatever we can. Can he get more of these overlords tonight? At this point, if we look at the vision of Reynor, I mean, he's got a couple banelings here. That's nice. Boom. Alright, 9 drones for 2 Banes. I think that's about the best case scenario. The problem is he had no idea about this huge army that Solar is sending around the left side flank on this map. There are a bunch of corrosive balls here that are eaten for breakfast, but likewise as well on Reynor's side of the engagement. Now the roaches are swinging around the site, targeting down whatever they can. A couple of the Ravagers have already gone down. And I think Solar just has the numbers, and that means we are going to game number 3. And that means it all comes down to a single map. Who moves on to the next round in the GSL, and who is eliminated? Leylines is the game. Neither player committing to any sort of cheese. Now, of course, both Solar and Reynor have been competing for a long, long time. Neither of them are going to be... Like, we've had players absolutely crash out in the finals like this, or this is not obviously a tournament finals, but this is an important game, and both of them know it. When you're playing it live in a studio, in front of an audience, you know there's thousands of people watching, right? When it's all on the line, it can be very easy to choke. Now, both of these guys are seasoned veterans. They've played a ton of StarCraft. I don't think we should really expect it from either of them, but this is certainly a game where we could expect a little bit of nervousness. It's easy to mess up, especially in a matchup that is as fast-paced as this. But maybe they can lock in. Did we ever use the terminology locking in? A decade and a half ago when StarCraft 2 first came out? I feel like locking in is a great term to describe how the players need to feel at this point in time. You gotta lock in, man. Play perfect. I don't remember anybody ever using that term when StarCraft 2 first released, but it is certainly what both players will be aiming for at this point in time. Ultimately, you gotta get into that flow state, right? Not think about anything else. One thing to keep in mind, too, for Reynor specifically, is that Reynor has tried to play in the GSL Code S several times before, and in his previous attempts, he had very disappointing results. In general, non-Koreans have never had the best results in the GSL. It's just such a... I don't know, it's a different experience. Reynor, though, has also been spending quite a bit of time in Korea. If I'm not mistaken, he's been there for a while now. That really does help. We used to see some pro gamers that would, like, just kind of fly in and then immediately start playing the tournament. It's certainly doable, but you go up against, well, guys that are playing on their home soil, right? They are not, like, worried about jet lag or anything along those lines. Then again, maybe those are just excuses. Anyway, this is a matchup where ultimately planning, like what we saw from SOS in that previous series, is not very relevant. Sure, you can plan some funky strategies for Zerg versus Zerg, but Zerg versus Zerg will always be Zerg versus Zerg. We have actually seen some fancy strategies in the past. What was it? Rogue versus Scarlet, if I'm not mistaken. With a really funky 14 hatch, 13 gas, 12 spawning pool build that looked exactly like a hatchery first threat, but was ultimately a Zergling all-in. We have seen some of those crazy builds historically, but it is just not a very flexible matchup. And so far, neither player really committing to anything like that. Third hatchery for the both of them. Defensive Banelings for the both of them. Yep. Roach Warren to complete the wall off. And I'm expecting, there it is, a similar situation on the other side of the map. So no tricks, no shenanigans. This comes down to pure skill. Evo Chamber, again, in the back of the natural. We've already seen that Solar seems to favor a delayed Evo Chamber. Getting the additional drones out a little bit quicker. Maybe getting an additional round of Zerglings in instead. There used to be a line of thinking in Zerg vs. Zerg specifically some time ago that Evo Chambers weren't worth it This is a Zerg versus Zerg movement that I think Elaser started. At the very least, I think Elaser was the one that first really started playing that style. Where apparently, he believed that Evo Chambers just weren't really worth it at all. So he just stopped making them until very late. And it has shifted the mindset a little bit. Like, the same thing is happening over here. Reynor's had this thing for a while, but if you constantly threaten the opponent with an attack, they may feel like they can't ever start it up. And we're once more in that spot right now, you know? Like, the players are so in line with how the opponent can play that, again, the first player to go for a lair, the first player to go for upgrades in the Evo Chamber and all that, you gotta be so careful. It's so easy. So this is Solar pretending to go for a move out. He just committed to a lair and Evo Chamber. There's no way he can actually afford it. Did he cancel the Evo? Yeah, he canceled it, restarts it again. Basically, any structure you start up is one less or maybe two less roaches. And sure, you can get benefits, like for example, roach speed or +1 missile. But if you die in the process of getting those benefits, it's not particularly useful. So ultimately, we see these weird extended hatchery tech build orders where both players are constantly faking it out. Ultimately, though, Solar now ends up with a lair. He's going Overlord speed. And he's got about 13 workers on the Zerg player in blue. That means that Reynor has been building up army. Yeah. So what he has done here effectively is make his opponent think that he is playing macro. So Solar has been scouting, he saw the Evo Chamber, and he knows that this is now likely going to be at least a type of game where Reynor is going to wait for that upgrade to kick in. But Reynor never started an upgrade. It's one of those 200 IQ but could be 20 IQ strategies. Either way, this is very committed by the Italian Stallion. Does he have enough to break through? And at this point, I mean, there's not enough units here for Solar. He doesn't have the spine crawlers done. He doesn't have his upgrades finished. He does have a lair, but none of those benefits have really kicked in yet. Reynor has got a perfect attack on the opponent, and he needs to make this attack worthwhile. He's still sending in more reinforcements. 7 drones have gone down thus far. Spine crawlers are starting to fall, but they are still putting in a ton of supplemental damage. Solar still leading as far as the drone count goes, but at this rate, it's not going to be for much longer. Yep, I think Reynor has done it. I think Reynor has just barely done it. This is such a ballsy attack, because it's so easy for this to horribly fail. It's one of those situations where maybe if Solar didn't scout, he would have just assumed that this type of attack was possible. But because he scouted the opponent's Evo Chamber timing, he assumed that this was going to be a player who would sit back a little bit longer. The mind games in ZVZ are real. Solar is going to try and stick this game, well, for as long as possible, obviously. You don't want to, well, accidentally lose a game that maybe you could have stuck in with for a little bit longer, but it's not going to happen. The amount of reinforcements Reynor can send across at this point in time is simply too great. And that means that Solar gets eliminated out of the GSL, but Reynor moves on.